how different was what you expected that to be versus what it actually came out to be?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, Peter, and I haven't spoken publicly about this at all, so this is your exclusive. Congratulations. But I think the biggest thing for me was that, I loved wrestling as a kid. I mean, Demolition, Dino Bravo, Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, WrestleMania in Toronto. Again, as I mentioned, the Hart family, you know how much Canadians love wrestling. So I loved it as a kid. I didn't watch as much as I got older. And then you get offered this opportunity to audition for it. You're like, why not? Of course I'd love to do this. And so they sent me a few matches to look at. And I would describe it kind of like an actor, like you're giving a few scenes from A Streetcar Named Desire. So I studied really hard. I nailed those 3 scenes, but then you actually have to do the whole play on Broadway. And that's, of course, a much different thing than just doing a scene study of 3 scenes. Now you have to be Stanley Kowalski for an entire run every week. So I think the biggest challenge for me was that, it's hard to be really well-versed in the sport when you're trying to catch a freight train that's already going 100 miles an hour, right? So I'm this guy running alongside the train trying to catch up. Someone like you who has all this wrestling knowledge and has been so well vested, like it's hard to make up for that gap in time. Now, the one thing that helped is, unlike baseball or other sports, you don't have to say, hey, remember 3 years ago at WrestleMania, what happened? Like, actually, you never do that, which is very different than normal sports. You're only looking at what I was broadcasting on Raw, what happened the previous week or 2 weeks. That's it. It was never forget about 6 months ago. So in that instance, you don't really need to know the history of wrestling. But I guess what I'm saying is, as a play-by-play guy, you got to know the moves. You have to know the mechanics, the nomenclature. And I think, in all honesty, in all candor, I kind of struggled to adapt to that. And, ultimately, I wasn't good enough for that position. Everybody there was awesome. Corey Graves is phenomenal. I think he's a huge talent. I think Byron Saxon's a huge talent. You and I both know you never want to be in a situation where you're the weakest link, and I knew I was. And that's never a good feeling to be in. But those guys were such good teammates because they knew, hey, listen, man, it's kind of like a baseball team. We know you need some help here. We're here to help you out. Like, you're new at this. Like, just lean on us and we're good to go, which was so generous of them. Kevin Dunn, obviously, is a great producer. Michael Cole was very, very generous. Michael, obviously, is not only the voice of SmackDown, the on-air voice of wrestling, but he also is part of the on-air, conglomerate. He oversees the talent. So Michael was so helpful. Every week, I would do the show. I'd watch the show. I'd call Michael on Thursday. We'd go through stuff, go through notes. I would try to make as many notes as I could. The big thing that I miss from conventional sports is we have incredible researchers. At baseball, at MLB Network, at NHL Network, ESPN, you have people who literally hand you notes and up. There's 5 notes on each person and stats, and all these things that I'm talking about. A stat pack as you get at a Calgary Flames game. In wrestling, you don't have that. You just go there and you're calling Charlotte Flair, and it's like it's up to you to kind of do your own research and all that kind of stuff. So I suppose in hindsight, maybe if I'd hired a Peter Klein to say, okay, here, give me all the notes you got on blah, 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 blah. What should I say about the Street Profits? Tell me about this and that. I kind of maybe would have had a better idea as far as the storylines. But everybody there, I have such respect for them because they work so hard, Peter. Week in, week out, those guys are on the road. Like, that is very, very hard to do. It's a huge commitment. Vince McMahon is obviously a very demanding boss. He knows what he wants. He's obviously a super smart guy. He's built up an enormous business. But they're really, really hard workers. And I will say, on a personal level, I hated to travel. I mean, I've got 4 kids, as you know. I hated the fact that every Sunday I had to leave at 12:30. I literally went to one of my boys' baseball games, and I didn't see my other 3 kids because you had to get there early enough to take a COVID test. Remember, this was April in Florida. Then you do your on-site Monday. I'm completely away from my family. And then Tuesday, I'd fly home. And literally Atlanta, I'd go right to MLB Network and go do a baseball show after not having seen anything the night before. So I really did not like to travel. I knew that I would not be able to do it for 52 weeks a year for 2 years. But again, it was a really cool opportunity. They offered it to me. I did my best. I'm grateful for the experience. I'm grateful to Nick Khan, my former agent, who was, of course, the president of WWE. I just wish I'd done a better job. But ultimately, I don't have any regrets. It's not like I can look back and say, oh, if only I'd done that, because then you wouldn't have known that going in, right? I just didn't have the facility to be a great wrestling play-by-play guy. And I will say, I'm very grateful to the people who were kind. I got a lot of hate. I got a lot of trolls. Don't worry, I saw all that. I can see my mentions. Thank you very much. But it was very nice, especially after I was done. The amount of people say, hey, listen, I liked hearing you. I thought you had a different voice. I thought you had a different cadence. I remember you from The Score. I used to watch on ESPN. So it wasn't as negative as some might think it was, I suppose.
I know I do have to let you go, but I have one more. What was working with Vince McMahon like? He is a mythical figure amongst wrestling fans. We don't get a lot of glimpses into the real life person. How many, or I guess, what were your interactions like with him?
Yeah, he was great. I didn't see him my first show. I mean, here's the other thing. They didn't give me any training, which I know some people kind of point out as maybe a little bit unfair. I mean, I don't think you hire Jason Witten on Monday Night Football and not give him a little bit of training. But I recognize that's the way the WWE does things. So no excuses. That's my fault that I wasn't good enough. But to your point, it's not like I met with Vince before my first show. I mean, I literally was just kind of prepping on my own and doing my best. And Michael Cole was helping out. But the first time I met Vince, like my first show was April 12th, my mom's birthday. I did not meet Vince there. I heard his voice in my ear at one point. He was giving some direction during the show. I met him after the second show. He summoned me in, and I met him, and he was very polite and very respectful. And he just basically gave really good feedback. He was like, he went through everything, very detailed, and said, okay, do more of this, or don't do this, avoid this. But at the end, he said, you're doing a good job, and best of luck. I'm like, awesome. So I met with him that time. He was at the meeting, except you'd have a meeting on Raw, like let's say at, I don't know, noon, I think was the meeting time. Oftentimes it would get pushed back. So Vince sometimes would be there, sometimes he wouldn't be there. But if he was in the meeting, like obviously it had a real different tenor. He's an important guy. He's got great presence about him. Whatever he says, people are going to do because he's the boss. I met with him again after the third show. Again, he gave me feedback, went through, okay, don't do this, do more of this. So I really appreciate the fact he was willing to meet with me and give feedback. And like I said, I just wish I could have done better. I wish I could have been there longer. But it was definitely cool to meet him. Like I said, I have a ton of respect for him. Everyone knows growing up, Vince McMahon, not just obviously the CEO, but obviously the character of Mr. McMahon. So it was really cool actually just to meet him and shake his hand and hear what he had to say, because he's obviously a very smart guy and a brilliant businessman.